Okay, and we are back for another episode of Alfacast. Looks like we're live. Dr. Barre, Lando, and I, we took a week off for Reunion Summit. It's good to be back. Hey, everyone, come on in. I want to make sure that we are good. Looks like we are on D Live and YouTube today. So we do this live. This is a live podcast. And we are excited to be back at it today, Bear. How are you doing today, my friend?
Hey, I'm doing good. I'm looking forward to just a little in-house talk. These are always nice and relaxed, and we can do whatever we want. Always fun to have guests, but it's great when it's just you and I too. So maybe we can even have some more audience interaction today as well.
Yeah, that would be lovely. Today's topic is going to be a fun one. We're talking about the biocomputer and what that means. And it's just good. I mean, I'm still a little hungover from Reunion Summit. That was a quite a feat. 7 straight days of live streams and replays and just continual screen time for me. It kind of sapped my energy, but I was definitely riding a high the whole week on it. And it was something that I'm very proud of. And it was great having you, Bear, involved. And you did an amazing talk that I felt was one of the highlights of the week. And it was definitely really fun to see a lot of the Alfa Vedic community involved. So we appreciate everybody who came out that was in the live chat. It was a lively crowd. We touched on a lot of different topics and practical solutions. And I have an announcement. Guess what? We are launching the free replay weekend that's starting tomorrow. And that'll go from Friday, Saturday, and Sunday for the Easter weekend. So as Christ is reborn, comes out to offer caramel chocolate eggs to all the kiddos, so will the free replay weekend be available. So that is our Easter egg to you guys. If you missed the content, you can jump on board there at reunionsummit.com and enjoy all of it for free. There's 41 talks, workshops, live panels. Barre was on an amazing live, or not a live panel, but a recorded panel with Dr. Andrew Kaufman and Adam and Josh Bigelson and myself, and that was a really fun one. And then we had a fun little wrap-up party that you popped into, Barre, that was pretty emotional and touching. And I hope everybody can catch that because it kind of summed up the whole week really well and was something that I really enjoyed doing, and having a lot of the speakers pop in and say hi. That was fun. So, Barre, were you able to catch any of the talks during the week?
Yeah, some of them, but I'm getting the replay. So I missed, about half of them. And there's really a lot of good people I wanted to see myself. And, just other duties around here and everything kept me busy. So I couldn't stay at it. But the great thing is I can get the replay and watch the whole thing over and over again. There's a lot of things in there. A few of them I might actually want to watch a couple times. Mike, also, I wanted to say that you and Josh Del Sol did an amazing job. And I know the week itself was very taxing, but I also watched you behind the scenes preparing for it and trying to pull this whole thing together. So it wasn't just that 1 week. That 1 week culminated a whole lot of work. And I was aware of it behind the scenes, but people that just tune into the summit, they have no idea what Mike and Josh went through just to get to day one.
Well, it was like 2-3 days leading up to Music and Sky event in Joshua Tree, and we told this story during the summit. But Josh calls me, he's like, "Hey, let's turn this into a summit. Let's record it. Let's hire a videographer team and then get an editor." And I'm like, I'm barely holding it together to do an in-person event in the heart of the lockdown. Now we want to turn this into a summit. So yeah, it was quite a feat, and we thank everybody who joined us and all the wonderful volunteers out there, our amazing Telegram admins that jumped in and helped. Mandy was just a rock star and still is doing it for the customer support, along with Giselle, of course, and Paula Pratt, thanks so much. She's been with us since day one. And it's just been an amazing thing to see people who are volunteering their time to get this information out. And we need it more than ever, Barre. It's really become quite apparent that the world is becoming more and more zombified as the days go by, and more people are getting caught up into the programming of the Matrix, which will tie into our discussion today, I assume, because literally programs are being run. Go ahead.
And it also ties into today. Happy April Fool's Day. And I think, April Fool's has been going on nonstop, on the population for quite a while here. But today we get to really celebrate it in a special way. And boy, talk about hoax upon hoax. And, a lot of us out there from past times have been warning what's coming on, that's culminating right now that people are watching. And we're saying, this is coming, folks, this is coming. Now we're saying, here's the next stage, here's the next phase. And a lot of people just aren't still seeing it. And, the real bothersome thing is not that, it's anybody else's business what somebody else chooses to believe, but, there's great consequences now with what the population is being called on to do, like modify their genome, things like that, make themselves into a different species. And so, yeah, there's a lot of important things right now. And I think today's talk will be very interesting, too, because we're going to discuss something that we haven't even alluded to that much, but it will tie in with everything we have talked about in the past. And just to help us understand yet again another facet of ourselves and what we're really doing in the Matrix here. And it's all about coding. And we are, in fact, a biocomputer. Our little avatar in the simulation is a biocomputer, and it has been encoded. It was originally encoded by our creator to do some marvelous things. And in the, over the eons, I think maybe going back whenever this archon energy or whatever the heck it is, started trying to usurp us, maybe 20,000 years ago or something. They started overlaying us with other codes and also helping us forget that we are in fact in charge of our own bio codes. And in past times, we, in different disciplines that I was involved with in clinical medicine, most notably back in the 60s and 70s, we were able to make some great inroads into that understanding and make it into a very effective way to help people trace the breadcrumbs of how they got in physical predicaments or, what we call illness in the first place, and just leave a map that not only allowed them to see how they got there, but each step of the way to assist them in recoding themselves back to the original and get rid of all the overlays so that their symptoms disappeared. So we'll talk a little bit about that today. And, Michael, I just, so our audience knows, you and I, we like to kind of wing it. That's just the way we do it. I don't take notes or, or prepare anything. And, in fact, with today's presentation, we haven't even talked with each other about what we were talking about. And I really like that because it allows us just to kind of riff in our way. The information that we're going to be discussing today is something that we could turn into many episodes. So we're going to highlight a lot of things. And then I'd really like, I know you and I will just turn it into a regular conversation. I'm counting on you to ask questions, and then also hopefully from our audience. So, so with that in mind, where do we want to start here?
Well, I mean, there's a million places we can go, and it is interesting that we could come right from what's happening in the world right now, as I'm seeing people virtue signaling by getting the jab, the good old jabber, which is crazy and it's heartbreaking. And I actually ended up kind of breaking down to my wife last night about it, because it's just someone recently, yesterday, that's close to us, who's young, not even 20 yet, went and got it. And it was just like, why? I was like, I don't understand this world, why people are doing this. They're just not educated. And she said, don't judge other people. You don't know. And I said, well, they haven't done the research. And she's like, how do you know? And I'm like, because if those who think they've done the research are literally reading corporate propaganda, you have to know where to go to do the proper research. And she succinctly said, this is like a religion. This is a belief. And this is what people want to believe in. And who are you to judge them for that? They are on their own path. And as Dr. Buttar said during the summit, when I brought this up about the mask stuff, and I said, my wife has this opinion that those are people that makes them feel good and good for them. And who are we to judge? And he said, well, she's more evolved than we are, because of course we see them as sheeple in many respects. But that's a challenge to me, Barre. It's like, man, where do we stand here? I guess this gets very spiritual, but in terms of tying this into today's discussion, this is where we need to be going, so that people do have the proper education and understand what the hell they are, what we are physically here in this realm, so that we can make the proper decisions and not just go out and virtue signal that we're doing our part, and literally, as you said, permanently, possibly, even though I don't like to believe anything's permanent. And I'd love to talk about that today in relation to the biocomputer. I believe we can upgrade and we can tinker and we can fix anything. Yeah, it's just, it's sad. It really saddens me. And actually, one of the top topics during the summit, Dr. Cahill, I think I'm pronouncing that correctly, Cahill, not Cahill, Cahill, from Ireland. This was brought up many times, was what is going to be the repercussions for those who do not get the cornholio jabber, and in relation to somebody who does. And, of course, this kind of goes into some germ theory stuff that we typically denounce, but also, as you rightfully told me over the phone last week, we don't totally know. And if there is an intimate mixing of fluids, what can come from that? How can that inject into my biocomputer, to keep it on topic here today? And literally now I'm thinking about real computer viruses, which we do know can exist, because when you download a corrupt file on like a PC, you can get malware and this stuff, and relating that to biology is interesting. So I'd love to go into all of that today and touch. I know we're kind of over the whole germ theory stuff, but the transference concept of information is interesting to me, and how we relate that to the biocomputer. So I'd love to, we could start wherever we want. And I know we did want to give some updates too about the farm and everything that's going on, but maybe we can end the talk with that, since we've kind of already jumped right into the topic of today. But is that a good place to start, relating to what's going on in the world right now, and with this gene therapy?
Yeah, fantastic. And it isn't a vaccine, it is gene therapy. In fact, they call it that themselves. One thing people need to understand is the professor doctor class is the lowest on the rung. They are the useful idiots, and I'm including myself, because I went through that training for the whatever you want to call them that's pulling their strings, and the institutions that train people like myself. And so if you go back to the Royal Society eugenicist, and this is nothing more than population reduction and control, culling the herds. And instead of a little card, that shows that we can proudly virtue signal on Facebook that, oh, I got my vaccine, yippee. I think we really should get a little tag on our ear, and really look the part of what we're playing, because we're no better than cattle when we do that kind of thing. So what people trust, the words of people like myself and professors in college, are actually the most indoctrinated, and indoctrinated with a lot of BS, really. So unfortunately, that's who we're taught from a very early age to trust. And we have to kind of get over this notion that doctors and professors really have some kind of, patent on the truth, when in fact, it's actually the opposite. And then, we discuss a lot about how, those circles have been compromised, and the real truth that, we talk about, the things that, you and I are both involved with behind the scenes, are the old sciences that come back from ancient civilizations that have actually been more greatly perfected since. And of course, those things, when we come out with them, even though they produce demonstrable results, which we can prove, they get marginalized and gaslighted and everything else. So that is a great segue into the biocomputer. And I'll just start with a little bit of a history. Back in the 70s, I started training. I had gone through my kind of conventional medicine certification, and I was in naturopathic college, but I was already very advanced in my postdoctoral training. And that was well before after naturopathic college and chiropractic and all that. I was in training hundreds of hours with a gentleman by the name of George Goodhart, who came from a long lineage of doctors himself and his family, and osteopaths. So he was really old school, and he became, I'd say, my first true medical mentor, and we actually became close. He's kind of like a grandfather, So anyway, George created something called applied kinesiology. Now, applied kinesiology was really key in that it drew the links between all of our different levels of neurology, biology, but then he also incorporated old school technologies such as acupuncture, meridian therapy, and what they knew, back in those cultures. So what he understood, every muscle in the body is, you could think of it as a display panel for an entire circuit in the body. And it represented in a meridian that way, one of the major, what we call muscle meridians, 12 meridians in the two center line, for 14 in all. And each of these meridian systems shared common circulatory, electrical, lymphatic, and so forth networks with different organ systems. So based on the health of a muscle, which we learn to isolate, and sorry, I've got a little noise in the back. We learned to isolate with precision muscle testing. We were able to show that the muscles were reflecting the health of this entire network, including meridians and the organ systems. Now, with that, we were able to, through muscle testing, discern to a great deal what was going on in overall health in a person's body. And Mike, I'm just going to pause for a second and ask if you're in the house here. I think we might have lost you.
No, I'm here.
Okay.
I just made you full screen. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, okay. So yeah, I'd rather look at your mug than mine when I'm talking, but that's okay. As long as I know you're there. Yeah. So with that information, we were able to do precision testing and also discern on many levels what was going on in the body. It was also a great advancement into what we think of as contemporary neurology. In fact, This work was greatly noted by practitioners and neurologists and, people of all different professions across the planet. And we all trained together, and it became a great melting pot because through it, not only were we learning this new discipline together, but we also were able to share ideas with people across the pond that, in fact, that was my first introduction to a lot of the old school European medicine and radiesthesia and things, that I've practiced to this day. So the main takeaway here is just like a household circuitry, where maybe the washer and dryer share the lights in the basement or something. And when you overload a system, then, the whole thing, sets off a circuit breaker. The same thing we found is that there's a hierarchy of needs in the body. And if, for instance, the liver was maybe overwhelmed with, things that it had to do, maybe it was overwhelmed with toxins from, maybe an overindulgent lifestyle, or just with things that we're being exposed to, with the environmental poisoning and things, then the liver would really need more of the available resources that would normally be shared with that whole circuit. So what the body would do in its wisdom, no different again than a house electrical system, it would shut off those less vital functions. So it would maintain full function with liver, maybe with the lymphatic circulation, neurology, all shared, but then it would shut down, that one component that was less necessary, which would be the muscle that's involved. In the case of a liver, we knew the major muscle meridian, the muscle involved was, one of the divisions of pectoralis, our muscle hill pectoralis sternal division. And so you might start having shoulder problems and things. And, originally I started out with more of an orthopedic bent. And when I learned this, next thing I know, it's, I'm testing the muscle and okay, here's your shoulder problem. You've got these rotator cuff muscles that are literally offline. They're not even responding to muscle testing. Your neurology can't even find them when you try to, resist against testing. And, but then that's what led me more into the whole bioterrain journey and doing more internal medicine. And so through the understanding that that muscle was off, then there was more advanced techniques to troubleshoot more or on a deeper level, what component of that network really needed to help. For instance, if the liver was involved, is there some type of nutrition lacking? Is there some sort of other process we need to do to take the burden off the liver? Or is there another priority organ involved where we need to treat that instead because the liver is pulling the weight of that organ and it's, really, doing damage or fatiguing the liver? So we had all these ways of prioritization, troubleshooting. And what was great about it, people would come in, maybe their back just went out or something. And, we would go through the process. And not only would we be able to treat the real, hierarchies of that particular circuit so that their entire health improved. And then at the same time, when we were done with our work, the muscles back online, because the body's saying, okay, just like in a household system, you fix the problem, you reset the circuit breaker, and now it stays on because you're not overloading the system. Pretty intelligent design. And that brings me to the major point that we need to understand is that there is no possible technology in the outer world that we have brought forth or will bring forth that is not already existing in nature. It's just impossible. There's nothing new under the sun. We don't invent a darn thing, but we do, use our creativity in a clever way in order to bring forth facsimiles of what already exists in nature. Now, the next part of it goes into more of how that led into the understanding of the biocomputer. So how are we doing so far, Michael?
Oh, doing great. And that is, you touched on a number of fascinating ideas from the fact that, I mean, this is really holistic in nature, right? Everything's connected. It's all a big circuitry that's all connected. And the muscle testing, I know, has been something that's come up many times in our Telegram group of late. Will we go into some actual practical ways people can do that testing at home, or or is it something where you have to go to a practitioner, kinesiologist, or someone like that to do that? Excuse me. And I know that, like, traditional Chinese medicine and with acupuncture and Ayurvedic practices, there's a lot of those classic indigenous traditions that do this as well, right? Through their own way.
Yeah, that's right. I've just got a couple show and tells here.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a great question, and we should comment on it. I am all in favor of what anybody can learn in order to allow them to be their own doctor.
Mm-hmm.
And I encourage that completely. Now, this will step on a few toes, but I am a little bit of a snob when it comes to muscle testing.
Okay.
Muscle testing, the way we did it, really followed a neurological model. And so it did require our doctor backgrounds to appreciate how the nervous system works and how to effectively interact and isolate muscles. Now, early on, there's a gentleman who was in our circles who wrote a book that he wanted to bring this forth more for the lay public in a highly simplified form. It's called Touch for Health. And Touch for Health was great. It got what we're doing kind of out to the public, and allowed people a bit of autonomy to start doing some simplistic muscle testing, in order to just take control of their own lives. Fantastic. However, it's in no way or shape the same as what we were doing as doctor types with a background in neurology. And I'd say the downside of the popularization of muscle testing is that a lot of people are muscle testing and jumping to a lot of maybe wrong conclusions and making assumptions that really aren't true. For instance, if you're not aware of the neurology of it, and we could go on all day about, just many examples of this, but the most basic, say you take a muscle and you're testing somebody and you say resist, and you apply pressure and then they resist. Well, what you're doing there, since they're responding to an outside force, is they're accessing their peripheral or spinal nervous system. Now, if on the other hand, you say push, you have them initiate the action a little bit, instead of just wait and be passively resisting, then you're testing motor neurons that are activated when you initiate something yourself. Two different things. Again, that's a simple explanation, but people are mixing and matching different levels of muscle testing, accessing different parts of neurology. And depending what you're trying to find out in the first place, you might want to use upper motor neurons versus peripheral nervous system. And then you get a bunch of people on the road that are testing the same individual, coming up with different answers. Well, this is just one of the reasons why people think sometimes that muscle testing is a little spurious and doesn't work across the board, practitioner to practitioner. But if you get trained practitioners that are working at a high level, you'll get a consistency of results. And you also have to become not just knowledgeable academically, but very, very refined in your in your muscle testing. And if you can consider Gray's Anatomy, which has 500 some odd divisions of the muscles, now we go beyond just the major muscle meridian groups. For instance, you could look at, our first example, the pectoralis muscle here, which is, part of a certain muscle meridian, which will give you certain information. But now if your testing is a little bit variant so that you're accessing more the sternal division versus the clavicular division versus the costal division, so forth. You're actually now accessing different neurological circuits. So there's a lot involved. One of the things that's very popular these days, they call it an O-ring test, where you ask yourself questions and then you say, oh, is that strong or not? Well, what you're now doing is a mental game. And that's okay, because again, it could be training wheels into self-sufficiency, but you have to understand what you're doing. And to do that kind of testing on yourself as you're concepting questions, it requires a great deal of clarity. And the point I've always made is that if you are clear enough to get a good test on, say, an O-ring test, then you wouldn't need to do the testing in the first place if you were that clear. So, so what I'd say, okay, I don't want to discourage people from doing self-help, but understand the game you're playing, use it, but then as quickly as possible, move on beyond the training wheels and just start discerning directly without this device in between. If you're doing neurological based, we'll say science-based muscle testing, then you really bring in a whole level of clarity into it that keeps the practitioner a lot more honest, and you don't have to worry about, well, you do want a clear practitioner, of course, but you're not just depending on whether or not that doctor's having a bad day or not. It's the same in the field of radiesthesia, and we bring up things like biogeometry and the Lecker antenna that I use to measure waveforms, and other devices as well. And there's another level of that. It's called take a dowsing rod, somebody who's just very clear, and they'll find exactly where water is. In fact, we actually had someone on the property here the other day that was good at that. And, again, with their clarity, they can just take, like 2 sticks and, and they'll respond because that person is very sensitive to that energy within the earth. And then these are just an extension of that person. There's a whole reality to that. In the field of radiesthesia, when people use pendulums and things, it's the same thing. You're dowsing, and what you're doing is you're concepting. In other words, on the mental plane, asking questions and then getting a response through your neurology, if you're sensitive or clear enough to what's going on. But advanced physical radiesthesia, biogeometry, Lecker instruments, for instance, this would be a great show and tell here. Instead of a dowsing rod, what if you had a dowsing rod that now you could calibrate into all the dimensions of any waveform and all the subplanes in between, and understand numerically what these means relative to waveform mechanics. And not only is that going to refine or specify your questions, but it's going to take it out of the mental plane, because when you have, for instance, a dual impedance antenna, or maybe a pendulum kind of technology that is designed where it can also tune in very specific dimensions and specifications of a waveform, now you're going to get a much more demonstrable result. You're going to get a real pull, and it's going to be much more accurate. And it's the only way that you can discern these finer levels of electronics, because if we try to do them, with electronic instruments that are using dirty electronics or electricity, then they override these, more refined levels in the first place. Muscle testing is very much the same. You can do concepting muscle testing, or you can do very refined neurological based muscle testing. So again, go for it. Anybody who's inclined to, experiment in this thing, but realize there's different levels of it. For instance, just in one of our basic books, there are different volumes. This is one of the early volumes of applied kinesiology. Hopefully you can see that. And this volume, just as an example, is just relative to everything pertinent to the head, neck, and the whole, what we call the stomatic gnathic system, which is the jaw, the dental structures. And if you go through this, the detail and the knowledge and the practical application of those things would put anything we learn in contemporary medical neurology to shame. In that, if you go to an orthopedic specialist and you have a knee issue, they're going to do some real lame basic tests and go, oh, okay, yeah, that's working, that's not working. And it's stupid. I mean, it's really, really dumb level stuff. Of course, where they excel is they have technologies where they can open up your body and do all the stuff that wows us. But then if they knew this stuff, they wouldn't have to open up and start probing into joints as much as they do, because they could fix this, the structures from the outside. Also, to do this, you have to have an anatomical awareness that is very precise, because we can't just open up the body and look at the structures. We have to know exactly where they are. We have to have a touch sensitivity that can palpate and differentiate between different structures, even down to the nerve level, let alone muscle divisions that are much cruder level and much easier to discern. And, so there's just a lot more training, a lot more refinement in this kind of work. Unfortunately, we live in the electronic contraption age where people don't trust things that aren't machines and things that we see on electronic scopes that can only tune into a very crude level of reality in the first place. So the next level that we'll go into, one of our early colleagues in the applied kinesiology circles, and we're going back, I was in those early circles, and there was chiros and osteopaths and, medical doctors, dentists, and we were all learning together, but we were the pioneering circles, learning from George. And one of the gentlemen, his name was Alan Beardall, who became another mentor of mine, and clinical kinesiology is what he coined. And now we brought it clearly into the biocomputer model from applied kinesiology. And now we were not only isolating muscle meridians, which are muscle groupings, which told us a lot. And there's still, I still use those more general group tests because they have a time and a place depending on what you want to know and what you're trying to do. In clinical kinesiology now, we go with surgical precision into every division of every single muscle in the body. And through that, we were able to discover how to access all the different circuits associated with those muscle divisions. And each of those muscle divisions had associations with different structures in the body, cranial structures, dental structures, vertebral level structures, acupuncture, meridian associations, what we call muscle acupuncture points. So we were really the first ones that added to the discipline of acupuncture in really 5,000 years. We were now drawing these really intricate ways that the nervous system interacts with those meridians by way of specific muscle divisions, and also with different visceral relationships. You might say, like in our first example, we're talking about, this muscle group up here in the shoulder, the pectoralis muscle associated with the liver. Well, now we can go in and find all the other networks that take you beyond the liver into associations with other organs and things. It was great orthopedically, for instance, if somebody came in like an elite runner and, they say, hey, my knee peters out at 5 miles. Well, what I would do is have them run 5 miles, map out a little circuit. So their 5 miles would end right at my clinic doorstep. And then I, lay them down and find out, when their neurology was fatigued to that level where they would normally experience the symptoms, and find out exactly, because now you have an awareness in the nervous system of, of why things are failing at that level. And then we would do very, surgical muscle testing and practical application in order to find out why at that particular point, the knee failed. And it would bring us into things that would also, again, improve the health of the individual entirely. So the real good stuff will come next because, that we'll talk about it gets into the topic of more the biocomputer and why we had to understand how do we communicate with this body, on that level so that we can get information directly from the body rather than theorizing and doing all the things with secondary electronics that are common to conventional medicine.
So when you say with the clinical kinesiology that you're going in and being much more specific, what does that entail? Like, because for instance, I'm a long distance runner somewhat. I like to run trail run every day. Just do my average 3.5, 4 miles runs, but I like to do a 10 miler, 15 miler here and there with elevation, and I occasionally will get in my on the outside of my knee, right knee. I forgot what that's called, the T band or whatever. It turns into a throbbing mess sometimes to the point where I got to ice it and I'm kind of out for a couple days. Let's say I come in and I've done that run. What would actually, be the process of how do you go in and see how those networks are connected? Is there what kind of instrumentation, or is this just something you literally do with your hands? How does that work?
It actually ended up allowing us to develop some instrumentation, which will remind me to talk about in a little bit. But it's really a manual technique with a deep understanding of the human biocomputer. What was different about those of us, and not all of us made the jump to clinical kinesiology because applied kinesiology, again, very advanced and very comprehensive and not at all trying to contrast in a negative light. But the jump to clinical kinesiology allowed a little bit of a different kind of doctor personality that was ready to explore a lot of other realms that you and I talk about on this show all the time, Michael. And right coincident at that time was the new computer industry. Now, this was even well before the first Apple Cube, but we were keeping a close eye on these early computer guys. And what we understood, and this is where I think maybe you can add a little bit of commentary because you know more about computer technology than I do. But we understood that those early scientists patterned their technology after the human nervous system. And in other words, it's a binary system. And everything either goes on or off. And of course, a computer is contrived so that it can make a lot of, on or off decisions a million times a second or, whatever it is. And, come to a lot of conclusions and do a lot of spectacular things. Well, the human body is infinitely more clever than that. And so what we found is if we started investigating into other areas of information that came before us, Michelangelo or Leonardo da Vinci, I meant to say, going back to Ayurvedic, and we'll kind of give you some examples of how we borrowed from those cultures and then applied it to clinical kinesiology and found out that, wow, we're actually discovering the keyboard of the body. We know the body's a computer. Now, how the heck do we develop a keyboard so we can ask more specific questions, but more important, make sure those questions actually have a neurological basis so that we're not just making stuff up. So, that's where it got really exciting. Okay.
So this kind of, it's interesting when we're talking about this notion of the biocomputer and perfect design, that kind of goes counter to the idea of Darwinian evolution in my mind, because it seems like this thing kind of came out of the gate like this. It just seems to be counterintuitive to think that this evolved into this thing, right, over time, that somehow we were less evolved, and I don't know how this applies to something like a chimpanzee and orangutan, what they say that we supposedly came from. But it just seems to fly in the face of that logic with what we know, which is something like applied kinesiology, and how this really amazing design with our consciousness is really what you're talking about when we say the stuff we talk about. And I've experienced this on long runs where I'm starting to get that banging pain, and I will do things like, and some people just say, oh, it's mind over matter, or you just willed yourself. It was a miracle. No, I actually applied my own consciousness, my own tinkering inside my anatomy, my physiology to fix that while I'm running, and the pain went away. Whether I altered my gait, but also it's something going on in my mind, right? That's doing that, that's applying that. And I think these are the kind of things that we need. These are the kind of notions we really need to be exploring more and getting off the wheel of Darwinian, Newtonian, limited, materialistic notions. And I will say that when I hear computer, I immediately, my alarms go up. I think, uh-oh, we're going to reductionism here. But this is not the case.
No, and remember, a biocomputer or any kind of computer is actually kind of dumb, because all it can do is what it's programmed to do. So with our own biocomputer, we're not calling ourselves dumb. We're calling ourselves maybe a little ignorant in the fact that we don't understand that we can do the programming of our own biocomputer ourselves. If you want to, do a special function on your computer and, it requires some software, you just download it. And, we have lost that understanding that we can download anything we want. In fact, the downloads are already there and we just aren't accessing them.
And I would go farther to say, we're both on Macs. Macs is based on Unix, which was an original language. And back in the day, like the original computer nerds, they didn't have a user interface like we have now. It was literally a blinking cursor, and then you would type the code to interact with the machine. And it was literally, that's what it is. It's just that we've now been, got through modern innovation, have these user interfaces that allow us to not have to know the code. And that is a great analogy for where we are with our bodies today, right? We now have these really just basic, as you say, ignorant user interfaces that we use, and we've forgotten how to code.
Exactly. We're supposed to code our own experience. And everything that's happening nowadays is we are decoding ourselves. We are decoding the universe. One of my favorite YouTube channels is FPV Angel, because they're decoding the entire Earth matrix. And I mean, they're just doing phenomenal work. It gets into Walter Russell and everything else. Okay, let's go back to muscle testing. When we were in applied kinesiology, the things that we carried forth in the clinical kinesiology, and I give all credit to Alan Beardall, because he led the way and I was his pupil, and continued it long after he had an early journey. He's in a crash in Great Britain, and isn't it interesting? Alan Beardall was one of those true geniuses on the planet that come along only occasionally. And people all over the world, wanted to have seminars with him and learn what he was up to. But then in his own backyard, which happened to be up here in Lake Oswego, Oregon, and I used to go spend time with him up there, they called him Dr. Weirdall. Just because he was understanding these things way ahead of the herds. Okay, so in applied kinesiology, we understood the binary nature of the nervous system because and we're very orthopedic inclined again. And so let's just say your normal walking gait, you take a step forward, well, certain extensor muscles then are activated, the ones that bring you forward. And then the extensor muscles, that, don't ambulate you in that direction, they need to be turned off. So we were able to demonstrate that when you activate flexor muscles, extensor muscles automatically turned off. So we'd do that, test the extensors, and there's just no juice there. And we said, well, that kind of makes sense. Otherwise, you'd be fighting yourself every time you try to take a step forward. But that's the way the body works all the time, not just with ambulation, but with everything. It's on, off, on, off. And now we go back to the story of we're looking at what these computer scientists are doing, creating these little gadgets, and we understand what they're doing. But, the light bulb came on. It's like, wow, we've got the real deal here. All we have to do is discover the keyboard. The first thing that led us to is looking at the work of Leonardo da Vinci. Now, Leonardo da Vinci did his famous canon of man, the drawing. I just knocked over some, where you have the arms and legs in different positions, different internal, external rotation. So we were able first to find out that, the arm in this position versus here actually created an electronic effect. And the reason why we looked at that is we kind of had a hunch that he knew something. And now with different kinds of instrumentation, we could actually get different electronic readouts that were across the board common to everybody, that we laid down and put the arm in this position versus that position versus another position. Then we're able to understand that each of those positions not only created a different level of electronics, but it would also access and be correlated with a different level of, the reality of what we call our biological selves. For instance, one level could be related to our biomechanics, the other our biochemistry, loosely speaking. The other would be more our electronic or electromagnetic level. So now we had a way of, relative to an opening, maybe we're testing a muscle. We also learned how to apply common electrician tricks, as far as getting, readings on the body by way of just touching areas, activating areas, and then having them light up. And just like an idiot probe with an electrician going through a circuit box and you see the light come on, we understood that, every body surface has different polarities. So if we knew how to pair up the polarities, like take a certain surface with a certain polarity, touch another area, maybe after you activated the muscle. So now the nervous system has a real, electronic awareness, just like bringing something up on a computer screen. Then we create a 2-point. Now we could, go on with these other more refined techniques we'll talk about to, extrapolate what level of reality we're talking about, and just 2-point down to the end of the trail until we got an end treatment point, which might require acupuncture. It might require osteopathic cranial work. It might require a biochemical intervention, a homeopathic intervention, anything you could possibly think about. And these days, of course, we're actually manipulating the waveforms way upstream. Back in those days, that wasn't, that level of awareness wasn't there. Mm-hmm. So that Leonardo, was really a major step in understanding exactly what he was talking about. And if you read a lot of his work, the guy was tapped in. He was in the old, in the secret societies, not the evil ones, but the ones that were holding knowledge for mankind for eons.
Yeah. And going back to the Pythagoreans, and then that was going back to the Hermetics. And I do have a question though, Barre, when you say electronic, because, and we've had other previous guests ask this, what do you, and it's interesting because this notion of electronic, I mean, we hear it in even mystical circles, like with the Ascended Masters talking about that and stuff. And is this, like you kind of said, electromagnetic, but is it that reductionist, or are we talking about something that's more kind of, I don't know, multidimensional when we say electronic?
Multidimensional. And, again, my first teacher, George Goodhart, he had a common saying which stuck with me my entire life, which is anything can cause anything. There's no such thing as one part not being connected to everything else. If you look at the trillions of cells in the body, they are all in a unified informational field. So they will be communicating on every single level and aware at the same moment of what every cell in the body is aware of. And then that gets into more intricate levels of intracellular and all the other creatures that inhabit the system. So it's an intelligent system that we still don't even begin to appreciate. So to answer your question, we're using an archaic language coming from our academic training. And we can quibble all day long, like one of our guests, I think I know who you're talking about, said, well, wait a minute, are you talking about magnetic, electric versus? Yeah, I understand, I have the same, background of, learning those terminologies. But when you get into these realms, we're talking about levels of reality, subplanes within each of those levels, and just another whole basis of pure consciousness that if you understand it, you can now measure any of those areas in order to change literally the consciousness on the ground of an individual if they're ready, that maybe is creating their problems, or not just problems, but maybe if they want to elevate their game to another level of awareness. And,
So,
go ahead.
so I didn't realize that actually applied kinesiology itself was this deep. For some reason, I always thought it was just mostly about, neurological connections, and the, the electrical connections of the muscles. But you're saying that these, I'm sorry, the gentleman who was the pioneer, he was tapped in and knew this stuff.
Oh, absolutely. And then Alan Beardall again took it to another level. So just another quick comment about the Leonardo da Vinci's work. If you look at his drawings, a little bit more carefully, you'll see that the foot might be rotated in certain degrees and everything. Well, we found that when we put people into these positions, it would create, again, another level of, I'll again use the term loosely, electronics that would access another part of that nervous system. And then we were able to extrapolate that to things that acupuncturists knew thousands of years ago. We have like coupled meridians and so forth. So now we could maybe put somebody in the arm position that would pertain more to biochemistry, but then we could fool around with the body positions of the lower extremities. And we found out, by the way, right at the hip here, when you abduct, adduct the legs, it activates a little acupuncture point, which is actually a neurological interface called gallbladder 30. Through this work, we were able to understand the significance of certain acupuncture areas as real important neurological interfaces. Gallbladder 30 was one of them. So if we were, for instance, working with somebody and then we manipulated the legs at the same time, we could actually get the neurology set on that level of awareness or reality, whatever, level of the body that we were investigating. It's no different than if you know how to open up a Word document on your screen. Now, if you don't know how to do that, you might know the Word document's there. You might be able to see it closed on your desktop. You might also know that there's something in it that you want to change, but if you don't know how to retrieve it through the keyboard, open it up, you can't make the changes. So that led to another level of understanding that if you want to make changes, you want to have a way to make the body vulnerable to those changes. You have to open up the neurological awareness. So not just like a Word document, now you can do whatever you want, and then you can save it and get out of it. So if we were manipulating gallbladder 30 with leg movements, now we've got that open. Now we can go into, the process of finding an end treatment point. And maybe the end treatment point is adjusting C1. Now a chiropractor would say, oh, there's a subluxation, you had rotation, whatever. And well, kind of, sort of, but what we understand, the vertebral column and every other part of the body, is they're all circuit breakers. And so when we made an adjustment, we understood that we were resetting that whole circuitry that was involved in whatever issue we were getting at in the first place. And furthermore, if we got a little more fancy with the body movements of the lower extremities, not just abduction, adduction, but started throwing in rotations, then we could access very precisely certain coupled meridians and different, more precise parts of not only the neurology but the acupuncture system, and get more specific information. So it was really unlimited as far as what you can do. So that leads me to the next level of the keyboard we discovered. But any questions or comments so far?
Well, so the Leonardo question about, he seems to tie a lot of sacred geometry and geometry into those drawings, right? And into that design. And that seems to relate in a way too, right? So, and that relates to biogeometry and everything as well, which you were kind of hinting at earlier. So it is all a unified science and how it all connects, it seems.
Yeah, and it makes total sense to me that this is where we're at now. That I don't really care to do that much work with anybody, the way I used to, even though it was very effective, because now we almost don't even need the body. We can work directly with the waveforms and the geometry way upstream. Sometimes there's, a time and place for bringing up the old stuff. I remember working with Alan one time, and we're doing this crazy advanced stuff compared to, the old days in applied kinesiology. And, one of the guys that was with us in the room, because Alan was doing an old applied kinesiology technique. He said, "Why are you doing that? We're like way beyond that." And he just looked at it and says, "Well, you never forget the old stuff." So there's a time and place for everything. And, that's the way I work these days. But more often than not, because we've advanced our awareness and our techniques, we don't have to do nearly as much as the old stuff. So, a funny thing happened last night before bed. I'm constantly impressed with our Telegram group. It's just a crazy collective of talent and personalities in there. And I think we've got the best Telegram on the whole planet. And one thing caught my eye. I'm pretty busy, so I only have time for a cameo every once in a while in there. And, and I know it was more than serendipitous that I just turned on. The first thing that caught my eyes, they're talking about mudras. Now, this gets into, all these, crazy hand positions and stuff they used to do, back in the Ayurvedic days and so forth. And, when they had very advanced meditation techniques. Now you go take a yoga class and they might have you hold your hand positions. But, that all of what we experience today is a very watered down version of what was a very elaborate, comprehensive biocomputer language. And clinical kinesiology, the next step is we brought that back into a contemporary and practical understanding. And let me show you something else here. I responded to the person on our Telegram. I said, "Wow, great telepathizing, because I'm going to be talking about that tomorrow." And fantastic timing.
The synchronicity in the Telegram group is quite amazing. I feel like that happens once a day, anyways.
Yeah. So in our very earliest works, now this is an ancient book, and we developed this way beyond this, but we developed the finger codes, formulas, in actual how to place the hands in, I don't know, couple hundred positions, very, very specific. Some of them, you really have to develop some dexterity to pull them off. For instance, we're talking about bioterrain medicine all the time. Well, there's one particular hand position that allows us to access a part of the neurology that is going to give us information about the microbial portion of the bioterrain. And Trippy. It looks just like that. Now,
yeah, I just want to say we apologize to the audience. It's hard to see. Barre's on a satellite, and we're trying out a new platform here. And for some reason, he's coming across. So if you can't see it, we apologize. He's not so clear. We are going to fix that. But I will say, Barre, we can probably post these mudras, these hand formations somewhere so people can reference these after.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So what I was, and this might be useless, you tell me, but in one of our early manuals, we started just giving out the initial understanding of the, more the how to designate the different joints of the finger, so that we could put out numerical formulas, and people trained in this would then be able to know how to put the hand position, or what they used to call the hand mudra, but what we actually called biocomputer hand modes. And anyway, it gets
Yeah,
pretty
unfortunately, it's hard to see, but I would love
Okay.
to either scan those and put those up because I know people would really enjoy those resources, or if there is an online place to get those. Yes, continue because this is trippy stuff. Like how does this connect? How does what we're doing with our hands somehow make that work? Like
Well,
and this
let's
is an
think about
ancient practice because this
it.
goes way back.
Yeah, well, when we started playing with this and actually experiencing what these mudras would do, it made perfect sense to us as neurologically trained doctors because what part of the body has more upper neuron connections than any other part? The hands.
Hmm.
So when you put the hands in these precise formulas and positions, you are activating the cerebral cortex in very precise ways. Now, that might seem far-fetched to somebody, but go back to your computer keyboard. I'm staring at mine right here, and
Mhm.
it's a very simplistic contraption made out of plastic, and we just know how to send messages into the hard drive in order to make stuff pop on the screen.
Mhm.
And remember, we are the original computer. This thing is a crude facsimile of what we already are. In fact, what technology is really supposed to be teaching us is not dependency on the technology, but it's supposed to be teaching us about ourselves. That's the whole purpose of bringing technology out to the forefront in the first place. Otherwise, we're just getting stupider.
Mhm.
So, and unfortunately, I think that's what's happening a little bit today. So these biocomputer techniques brought us in a very demonstrable way to face with ourselves, but more importantly, as doctor types, being able to take a body on a treatment table and to communicate about anything we want to do. And I made a comment before where you need to make something. We'll take an easy example like a chiropractic adjustment, and then the doctor says, "Well, come on back next week. We might need to adjust that again." And meanwhile, you're going back to your chiropractor once a week. Well, if you go through these trainings and treat the body sequentially the way we were able to do, if an end treatment point required a spinal adjustment or an osteopathic cranial adjustment, it would reset. Just like somebody in the trades knows, well, you don't want to do this before that because it'll just, if you do it in the wrong order, it's not going to work and you'll just undo what you did before it. Same thing in this. So you don't have to go back to your chiropractor forever for your weekly adjustment. The
Mhm.
adjustment did the reset if you did it right, if you did it in proper sequence, and then you wouldn't have to do it again. Then you could move on to the next thing. Nobody has a deficiency of adjustments. Nobody has a deficiency of acupuncture needling techniques. What we're supposed to be is constantly moving the ball downfield. And that's in fact what we learned how to do. So hand
Mhm.
mudras, um, perform the same function as what Leonardo da Vinci found, which was actually what we would call a body mudra. But then again, we were able to discern, that it actually manipulated the electronics, and through neurology, we had a real communication. And also, when we did any end treatment, the body was exposed neurologically so that now it had a much deeper lasting impact rather than a temporary effect. No different than
Wow.
if you know how to open up a Word document, you make the change, you save it, it's going to stay, it's going to be there next time you open it up.
Now, with the mudra too, which I do in like some of my yoga practice, especially in like Kundalini yoga. Sometimes you're moving the hands too. And someone mentioned this in the comments, which Barre, I know you've seen this series because we talked about it. I think you and I just watched the first season, and then we were like, oh, the ending was so bad, I gave up on it. But do you remember that show, the OA? that was on Netflix, and it was about those people who were like trapped in that lab, and they were doing those movements. Remember? And they were like, they're interfacing with like different dimensions and stuff. There's something to be said. Someone said, well, so that was more of a documentary than a fiction. But, and what's funny is we had that exact conversation, if you remember, when that series came out. And of course it ended usual social justice, like typical Hollywood garbage. But there were some very interesting aspects to the to some of the screenplay there, because they were doing those weird like whoo, whoo, movements and stuff together, and I was like, whoa. So that is some ancient technology, and I guess what some would even call magic, right? The archetype of the wizard who's doing the hand movements to interface and create specific phenomenon in this reality. There's something to be said there with how the biocomputer can work with the electronics to literally, engage with this reality.
Yeah, exactly. Every day I use my Tai Chi ball, that you've seen when you're over here. And, you're doing kind of, internal work, and the movements, along with your internal visualization, you are using those movements to create an amplification of those same energy centers that exist inside of you. And you not only build up those energy reserves to the point where now you can use that energy to do things on the outside that you wouldn't normally be able to do with just a muscular effort, but at the same time you can make that energy available now to channel through different circuits that now that's where you get into a point where you don't need doctors and all this kind of stuff in the first place. So it's all about creating our our imaginative faculties, which are the only real thing there is, because that's the only possible thing that can manifest into the matrix in the first place. But like the old martial artists knew, they understood how to create these movements in order to build up our energy bodies. And then, with some of our movements, especially when you get into Bagua and so forth, you're actually reenacting the Merkaba, where is just like what Walter Russell talked about, where you have the dual vortexes that are simultaneously interchanging and radiating information to create the next frame of our reality, which we think is real. Now, you get more in touch with the fact that, our entire body is nothing more than these two interchanging vortexes. And when we go back to the understanding that we're the ones that are putting that in motion, and that is compressing informational fields based on our imagination, our belief systems, our emotional content, now we realize, well, I better be a little bit more responsible about the crap that comes out of my mouth and all the thoughts I'm having, and especially the emotions that really bring things to life. And then you couple that with a practice, it gets you in a very meditative state, so that you learn how to still the mind and stop the garbage, and back to computers. The one axiom of computer technology that's the most true is garbage in, garbage out. And here we are as a species, an entire planet, we've got nothing but garbage coming in. And then we look out here and we wonder why there's chaos and why, we have the problems we have. Well, duh. So, these techniques, that we applied to medicine that would allow us hands-on to treat people, follow the breadcrumbs of whatever physical predicament they thought they were in, allowed us not only in hindsight to have a complete map of how they got there in the first place, but it also, more gratifying than seeing a tumor go away or something, was the fact that after you're having totally different conversations with these people that they would never have even, it wouldn't have been capable of, the first day that you saw them. So you really saw firsthand that, the name of the game is you're really changing the consciousness. And again, it never, ever stops. And, that's why we just keep moving on with our technologies and don't just, keep doing the stuff we were doing 40 years ago, even though that's what got us, what helped get us here in the first place.
Yeah, and you brought up one of my favorite topics, which is a whole other podcast we should have. And I think we might even be able to get an amazing guest that you would be very excited to have on here. And we're talking about the Merkaba. Well, one guest that we're going to have on, I want to have Kumara on, who was in the summit, who has this amazing company, the Omni Card, which we're going to have a whole talk about. Barre, I want to schedule a talk with him about this because he uses biogeometry right in it and everything. But anyways, he has interviewed a few times Melchizedek. Am I always saying his name right? And who talks a lot about the Merkaba, science behind it and the whole kind of metaphysics related to that. And that is, like, to me, one of the greatest manifestations of the biocomputer. And literally then we're time traveling and we're like exploring the cosmos with our own ability to ignite and to activate our Merkaba, which goes all the way back to Egyptian times. And this ties into all the sacred geometry, the biogeometry, everything. And that is the real technology where we should be going in terms of exploring space, not the reductionist, materialistic model of, Tesla, or, of not Nicholas Tesla, but, the SpaceX and NASA, which we all know is a psyop, and all of that to keep us away from the real technology, right, which is within us. So anyways, the Merkaba is fascinating stuff.
Yeah, I haven't kept in touch with him. I read his books long ago, The Flower of Life, parts 1 and 2. I still have them on my bookshelf out there.
Nice.
Yeah, he did great work. So he's still at large.
Yeah, he kind of disappeared for a while, right? But so our friend Kumara is interviewing him again, is in touch with him, and when we have our meeting, I will bring that up because I would love to do an Alfacast with him and go deep into the all the functionality of what he knows, because according to him, right, he's had direct connection with Thoth, or that and right, and had that download of how all that technology is supposed to work. And this gets esoteric, and then immediately we'll have comments today, Barre, that this is satanic. We had a recent comment, and this is a shout out to Marty Leeds, who was in the summit. We had him on as a late ad, and I love that man, and how he's so brilliant in explaining how the esoteric is just hidden knowledge. It doesn't mean it's satanic. And when we say as above, so below, that's not satanic. You're getting lost in the dualism and the polarity there. It's how you use it. This is just universal, functionality of this reality. As above, so below is one of the core, tenets of how this reality works. It doesn't mean because we say as above, so below, we're satanic. And also, I think it's important, as Steiner says, to make the differentiation between Luciferian and satanic. But anyways, kind of getting off on a tangent here, but I think these are all things that just drive me crazy. It's like we're not allowed to talk about this because we get put in this, there's this fundamentalism somehow that's been injected into the truth movement, reality, where if we talk about these esoteric ideas, then somehow that's satanic.
Yeah, and at the bottom of all the real Satanism is religion. Religion, literally means to re-enlist people. That's the Latin derivative. Loosely, it means to re-enlist. So when the early Christians were out there running around naked in the desert and saying, we don't need government, F your taxes and everything else, they needed to create a religion to re-enlist the people into the Borg, because they were losing control. So now you take the real teachings of Jesus, distort them, and, get people into these false indoctrinations. And then in the meantime, you occult all of the real things that all of the great prophets, including Jesus, were actually telling us. And then on top of it, you say, by the way, if you ever hear any of this other stuff, not only are we going to persecute you and burn you at the stake, but all of the rest of you people, you're going to go to hell if you, listen to this stuff. And of course, that kind of religion, they knew from the start, would only have a shelf life of so many centuries, which is why leading into the, more the Middle Ages and beyond, and the Royal Society, they had to create another religion that we now call science. But in the process, they had to occult all of the real science that used to be called alchemy and give us this one side of the equation, reductionism. So to this day, we have people that are in the science religious cult, and then you also have people that are in the religious cult. And, either way, they got you coming and going. And,
and then, you do have the occult, which, yes, is just hidden, but you do have the dark occult where they in specifically take these truths and invert them so they can have their black magic power. Of course, that is what they do. But the thing is now, because we've gotten everything's become so occulted and people are so lost with this ancient wisdom that everything is out in the open is inverted. We literally live in a completely inverted reality where, and this is, I know we're going to get to this because it's been brought up in the chat, but the idea of transhumanism is the inversion of the biocomputer. It is the legitimate attack on this true technology by man's ego trying to subvert and control nature and say we can create beyond nature, which in and of itself seems to me be what Luciferianism is, right? Is the false light. And that is essentially what the transhumanism model for the future is. And of course, that is counter to natural law and counter to the beautiful technology we're talking about today, which relates to the biogeometry and the sacred geometry and everything you're talking about with real electronics and with the Merkaba and all that. And so, yes, this is why this discussion is so important. It's so that we can get science back on track to what science is supposed to be, which is just a practice, not a religion, just like mysticism, or spirituality is a practice, not a religion.
Yep. I have a quick Merkaba story. It's kind of fun. And when I was reading Melchizedek's books, I don't know if it was in his second book or another book written by somebody else. I'm trying to remember quick. This just
and when we say Melchizedek, we're talking about Drumvalo Melchizedek. Sorry,
Drumvalo. Yeah, thanks. Yeah. Okay, so they were talking about Drumvalo. I think it was a third-party book, and they brought up the story of when they went back in time and rematerialized the U-boat from World War II or something.
Yeah, the Philadelphia.
Yeah. Okay, so there was two brothers, allegedly twins, that were on that boat. And the gentleman that wrote the book was talking about these twins that are now brought forth in time and alive, at least at the time of that book. I probably read it, I don't know, 30 years ago or something. And this gentleman, this is where it gets really weird. My jaw dropped open, when I was reading this. He's talking about meeting these twins from the boat from a different time period, and that he was introduced to these twins by then head coach of the New York Jets, Pete Carroll.
What?
And I read that and I'm like, what the F? Because now Pete and I grew up in the same area.
Yeah.
We played in opposing schools. He's a football player, so was I. And we were both selected after high school to play in this Northwest football all-star game. So we were on the same team. And I got to know him a little better and everything. And anyway, a lot of other personal stories. I won't go into them.
Yeah.
Yeah, even death had a connection, And so anyway, Now, I haven't seen him in years, and I'm just waiting. In fact, I'm going to try to get a hold of him maybe someday, but I'm hoping we run into each other through some of our old circles someday, because the first thing I'm going to ask him is like, is this true? And what, how the hell are you, somehow connected or meeting these guys from a different time? Anyway, I just saw it was kind of a fun story.
And Pete has been known, hasn't he, talked about aliens and stuff? And
I think he's a little out there, but I haven't known him for years, so I don't know.
And maybe this ties into the idea that often those who are successful in Babylon, which is a term I like to use for the outward, maritime-driven kind of reality that people think is real. I like to call it Babylon. A lot of people do. But maybe you find success right now because you are somehow connected to these weird realities. And you play the game that way. I don't know. It's trippy, man. That whole Philadelphia experiment stuff is really trippy. I used to love geeking out on that. There was maybe 2000, 2001, 2002. I went deep into all that stuff. There was that guy, Al Bielek, who I was following all his stories, and it goes into all these like secret, laboratory experiments in New York at, I'm blanking on Montauk. And they were like creating electronic monsters out of different dimensions. And then he went to like 2045 and came back, and he was supposedly part of the Philadelphia experiment. When they phased out of reality, they went way into the future. And I mean, this stuff's all out there, and I don't know if it's all just a psyop by the Babylonian kind of control grid, or if this stuff's real. I don't know. That's why on Alfacast, we kind of stick to what we know, which is like why we talk about health in the body, because you have that background. Why I talk about crypto and blockchain, it's just like what we know, gardening and farming and stuff. But these are fun thought experiments to have, and trippy stuff to go down. And that is so weird that like that relates to Drumvalo Melchizedek, which is more kind of esoteric spiritual, but then you tie it into like dark military operations and stuff, and it's all connected in the end. It's all woo-woo stuff that's somehow connected, and in the end I think it's all relates to Bigfoot too. So it's
here we are in Bigfoot country, and all of our Native American friends here that they take our gardening classes, and when we're teaching for Oregon State there, a couple years ago, we had a whole bunch in our class, and man, they're talking about Bigfoot like, oh no, it's real.
Oh yeah. So we've talked about Bigfoot on the show before, and with some of my stories and experiences, and that makes what I guess what I love pulling out of all this stuff is that we live in a magical place. This realm is way beyond what modernity has defined it as, and it's something that we should appreciate every breath that we have on this planet to go out and experience the magic, because it really is a magical realm. And what I think an amazing grounding thing that we do here is we relate that to health and wellness, because you've seen what modern medics would call miracles aren't miracles. It's part of the realm. It's part of the reality that we're in.
Deb will probably kill me for saying this on air, but just the other day we're having a discussion, and she was remembering a fairly recent encounter with a bear, where she went out and there was a bear right there, and they had direct eye contact. And to this day, she says, "No, bear, that was not a bear. that was something else." And she said anyway, you get where I'm going with that. So there's a lot of things that are going on, that you miss out on when you're living in metropolitan areas, because we're communicating in a whole different way with, the prevalent energy patterns, all the, and there are very real beings that, are everywhere all the time. But in natural habitats, when you're away from the electronics, we don't have any power lines and that kind of stuff for a long ways. The veils are a lot more thin. Now, when you get into the work of Rudolf Steiner, in fact, I was just reading a book the other night, and it was an illustration that Rudolf did. And it was looking at different, what he would loosely call gnomes and spirits and things like that. And they're alive and well. If we think that
Barre froze on us. Let me try something. Yeah, so you're back. So you were talking about Steiner and these entities. And yeah, the forest fairies are some of my favorite. Anyways, go ahead.
Yeah, and he relates those to different, again, loosely calling electronic levels, different dimensions. And we can qualitatively measure very accurately all those things that he talked about in all of his teachings, but more important, relate it to science, engineering, lab work, working with somebody's body. And, so this stuff is real, including these other intelligent life forms that are around us all the time. Of course, they will not be as prevalent if you're not in a natural habitat.
I have friends that are more tapped in that have seen things that they can't explain. I had a friend here that was living here for a bit. He's left, but he told me the story of how he's had a fairy appear to him and manifest and have a discussion with. And I've heard other things about that. The fairy folk, right? We have legends, the Celtic legends about the fairies, and then of course things like sprites and gnomes and there's this kind of synchronistic storylines that run through all the different cultures about it. And of course, modernity once again wants to reduce this to just myth and the human imagination playing out through story. But there's definitely seems to be even caught on video. And unfortunately, people say, it's hard to know if it's an artifact or something. But I've seen some trippy videos online of little kind of lights and orbs and things flying around, and you just never know anymore because of things we can do with video now with effects. And there's people that unfortunately go out and make those, all the time. But I believe in all that stuff. I always have since I was a little kid. And I just hear the stories from people that are more tapped in that have having these experiences. And I think it's wonderful to be able to appreciate that and be open to that. I think it makes the world more magical and just a more lovely place to be in.
When you go over to the retreat, which, parts that aren't open to the public over another mountain range to Shasta. And as Deb and I have been involved with that group for a long time. And there's a prominent European photographer who would take a lot of pictures of the gardens within the Saint Germain retreat. And, very often you'd see these little fairies, whatever you want to call them, actually show up on film because the veils there's been such a concentration of work there for so long that the veils are thin. So he would actually capture that on film. So, a lot of this isn't just us, talking fanciful. It's firsthand.
Well,
experience.
It's funny you mentioned that because this individual I'm talking about who had this fairy appear that's where it was. It was there by Mount Shasta. And also they had a weird experience where their phone appeared all of a sudden. They were driving up to the mountain and all of a sudden the driver's phone disappeared and they looked and the phone was on the other side of the window outside of the car on the windshield. It phased through the windshield. I'll have to have Kevin tell that story sometime to you. But so anyways, you go up to places that are known to be vortexes or where the veil is thinner and you do have amazing phenomena happen.
Yep. And somehow this all has to do with muscle testing. I don't know how, but
yeah. So the biocomputer, so we were touching on Leonardo da Vinci and who I feel was ascended master, tapped in, someone who, was definitely one of those very special characters who was probably, like a Saint Germain type person. I think there is even some idea that maybe Saint Germain was Leonardo da Vinci and also was Plato and some of these other important characters that introduce new ideas to humanity. But what you were touching on some other classical kind of frameworks for kinesiology or the biocomputer still. You were starting with Leonardo, but were there other?
Well, another interesting thing we found out is, and Alan Beardall started this, and then it was continued later on in groups I was involved with. Every single muscle division in the body, not just the major meridian muscle groups, but each of the intricate muscle divisions are recognized neurologically by a specific frequency. And we were able to determine that. So, you could think of it as a carrier wave, and that's how the body, the nervous system recognized a particular part of itself, including a muscle division, by this specific of the muscle carrier wave associated with that particular division only. In fact, one of our members created a machine that, we would use electrodes, and I use this in my clinic a lot, where you could maybe show that there's a muscle that was just online not working, because it's turned off for whatever the reasons we described. And then with the electrodes on and you dialed in that frequency and you retest the muscle, it came back online. One of the more shocking things that I experienced early on with that machine is I treated a number of people with MS, and this one gentleman especially had been in a wheelchair for a long time, and I used to have to go out and get him and carry him in and put him down on the table. And he had no function in his lower extremities. For instance, if I were to say using rectus femoris or whatever, no way. It just is interrupted. The myelin sheaths had deteriorated, so we couldn't get the signals from here to there. So now putting in a particular frequency for rectus femoris straight head, which is the one associated with this story, is I held it up and I said, hold. And he said, but we had the frequency dialed in, and I let go of his leg, and it was just, he was holding it up in the air. And totally shocked him. Said, how am I able to do that? It's like, well, we were using an external medium to make the connection for him neurologically with the frequency for that muscle to make the connection. Now you turn, the machine off and the leg would just boom, drop like a rock. So wouldn't some of this knowledge maybe be useful for conventional medicine, rather than looking for the, whatever to keep you safe for the latest invisible terrorist?
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, obviously, conventional medicine is obsessed with just the biochemistry aspect. And they, and there's a reason why, because of the Rockefeller science and medicine that, for profit and for eugenics and all that. But question on that. So the machine doing that now, is there a way that somehow the biology can remanufacture those sheaths, right, in the neurons that are that transference of, we know of the electrical current of information? Is there a way to regrow that, or for the body to fix that so that the body can heal? Yeah.
Absolutely. And I saw that in many extreme circumstances. Early on, before I knew near what I would learn later on, my very first practice out of the gates, before I moved to Hawaii, this woman came, was brought up, just heard about us through the grapevine. So I had a little practice up in Marin County at that point, that had MS, and she could barely walk. She lost her sight. She was a teacher. This is just one of many, many examples, but just as an example, and we could do a much better job on her to this day. But after 3 months of treatment, she was full ambulation, had her sight back, was back at her job, riding her bicycle to work. And, she's just going downhill fast. So that was many examples that I saw firsthand of just when you know how to communicate with the body and intercede on what the body tells you what to do, and prioritize what that body needed that was unique to maybe somebody else with the same exact symptoms, and then sequentially, go through things properly, then the body would start regenerating itself, including nerves. And the first thing you learn in conventional medicine is, well, nerves don't regenerate. Well, that's stupid. I mean, that's just ridiculous. There's one form of acupuncture that I've integrated in over the years, and I love it because it's very neurological based. It's from about 5-6 centuries ago, but it was very well known in the old countries as being very effective. But it really capitalized on those points, and then some points that aren't even in conventional medicine, that are associated with the different parts of the central nervous system that allowed us to increase the circulatory system, neurologically, lymphatic, and every which way blood flow, in order to regenerate body parts. I'm just looking at looks like an old person's communicating with me there.
Marika. No,
Oh,
but
okay.
yeah. Well, thank you, Mariko. I just showed your comment there. It's our pleasure. That's why we're doing what we do. As she said that she just wanted us to know that made such an impact on her life, and that knowledge I have to this day. Thank you so much, Marika, Maraika. Maybe an old person. Barre, that's so interesting. Someone said here too, in fact, I'll just show it with our fancy new thing, lion's mane mushroom for healing the sheath there and stuff. And that's interesting, since we just re-released, or just put out, our illumined shrooms line is back in stock and I think lion's mane was maybe one of the ones we were waiting on. So yes, couldn't agree more with that.
Actually, that person's a plant that I had put in there to push our new no, I'm just kidding. But lion's mane is very well known to, have a regenerative effect on the central nervous system. It's why we include it as one of the 6 mushrooms in that particular blend, with the fulvic mineral delivery system and everything, so that we weren't just, putting mushrooms together. It actually became a technology. And so I'm glad to have that one back available. We couldn't get lion's mane for a long time. And, just a little note that our source of mushrooms are cultured, test out the highest in all the polysaccharides, the heteropolysaccharides, and the all the factors in mushrooms, that the reason why people take them. So we couldn't get that because with the prevailing false flag viral thing, everybody's concerned about their immune system, so they couldn't, manufacture the stuff fast enough. So it's very concentrated, and it's a very important part of that formula. And it just shows you that when a mycelium has a particular effect, like regeneration of nerves, and it shows you also how we're interconnected with the external environment, with all of the resonance that is conducive to healing our bodies. In fact, the more we get tuned in a way we're suggesting here, there will come a point where you don't even have to consume the mycelium to regenerate your nerves. You'll just have such a strong resonance with the natural habitat and the things that are growing around you, that it will constantly give you those informational fields through direct resonance to keep your body in tune, and then also have a great interplay with us in the reverse direction to them, as we are supposed to be stewards on this planet. And so now you have true symbiosis, where the bodies of them and ourselves are flourishing and having a great time together.
Oh, that's amazing. And why it's so important to embrace nature and get away from the cities for now and get into nature, because that's why we're here. David Avocado Wolf mentioned that. And we have some questions too and comments about relating to not only lion's mane, but also psilocybin and even cannabis, those effects for the myelin sheath. And it is interesting, mycelium, very similar sounding. But David Avocado Wolf, who's very outspoken about his, raising different psychedelic plants and stuff, said that after a time, I don't remember if it was. I feel like he was doing stuff with what do you call it? What's the Amazonian plant? They use for blanking out right now. It has the DMT in it.
Asparagus? Oh,
Yeah,
oh, no, asparagus is just a regular medicinal, but it's from down there.
they do the shamanic ayahuasca. I believe he was talking about raising when he was doing ayahuasca. I may be wrong. I think down in Mexico, but he said after it might have been just cannabis. But I'm sorry, David, if I'm putting words in your mouth. But what I loved about what he was talking about, he's like after a time, he didn't even have to ingest or interface physically with the plant. He was getting the same effects overall from just growing it and having a conversation with it and interacting it, as you said, with the waveforms, with the intelligence of it through the resonance. And that's just and you know it as you grow, I grow, I sense that as every year I continue on in my learning how to farm and plant and grow and garden. You get that conversation going with the plant life. It's fascinating.
Here on the farm, we have certain crops that we favor. We keep expanding and diversifying, but the original ones, like the Jiao Gulan, that now is in its, like 5th year of growth at this particular property. Not only do they adapt to the habitat, but they adapt to us. And there's just the resonance communication gets stronger yearly. I'm a big fan of psilocybin, because psilocybin is so important for our neurology, especially the pineal and our higher brain centers. And the thing that people don't understand is you don't have to have a psychedelic experience. You can microdose. And you're constantly working on your neurology in certain ways that, is very powerful. And, it's not like you're walking around, tripping out or anything. You don't even know you had anything if you're microdosing properly. So all of these plants have a great effect. And of course, we've learned that, like back in the 60s, well, if I take a whole bunch, I can, go to a rock concert and whatever. But they have much more important functions, and there's a much more refined way to use them. And it really is all about resonance.
Yeah, and intention, of course. Like if you have intention to go party with it, then you can do that with anything. But if you come at it with a more sacred outlook, then you will have a more sacred connection and experience from it. And as I've stated always, I think every single human on this planet should at least do one large dose of psilocybin once in their lives. That's all it takes to have that transcendental kind of conversation with the planet and yourself and your higher self and all that. I mean, unless you're seriously tapped in spiritually and you don't need it. But I think, unfortunately, because most people aren't, and they're really just kind of raised in a very, outwardly shallow perspective, this allows you to kind of hyperdrive into that reality. But of course, I'll say the best forms of that transcendentalism for me now is through hyper awareness via breath work, meditation, stuff like that. I don't think you need that, but it is a great shortcut, and nature gives it to us. And I did it in college, and occasionally we'll do it every now and then. It hasn't called me in a while, but it will call me, and that's when I need it. And it is a medicine. It is a kind of a way that nature can really help propel us towards this higher understanding of who we really are. So, and it's cool. I've said this before, and I'll say one last thing. I am seeing the younger generations now more tapped into this in terms of their quote unquote partying, or in terms of their celebration at concerts and stuff, versus the more kind of party drugs like the cocaines and the ecstasies and stuff. It seems to be that it's definitely right now, like the younger generations are super tapped into psychedelics.
Yeah, and again, I want to emphasize, I'm talking about micro dosing, which is not recreational, or even having those kinds of effects. And when you understand that, it's no different than taking a mineral supplement, but it just has a profound effect on your neurology without you shifting your consciousness. But over time, it will shift your consciousness, not in a drug-like way, but it will expand your bandwidth of perception. One little note for practitioners out there, since we're talking about some practitioner tools with applied clinical kinesiology, the biocomputer, and there's so much more we could talk about this. I know we've been talking for a while, so this might be, kind of a good way to wrap things up. What I've learned as being a longtime practitioner is that the reason why I did it was because I needed to learn things. And it was a very intense way of learning things. Now, one of the people in the Saint Germain work, who his pen name was Godfrey Ray King, and he brought forth the transmissions from Saint Germain. And this isn't a religion, by the way. If you really get into this work, you realize it's just pure physics. That's all we're talking about. But he was also known behind the scenes as a great physician, because he was responsible for many so-called healings, even though he would be the first one to say, well, you can't heal another person. Jesus would tell you that, a person has to be ready. But he had, an amplified energy field that allowed him to be very effective. Is that, at a certain point, he needed to no longer put his hands on bodies and to work more just with the light frequencies in those other realms. And what I've understood just in my own journey is that is absolutely true. And for me to hang my shingle out again and go back and start doing all the things I used to do physically with people's bodies, even though they could be, very effective, it's not my journey anymore. And that's why I'm, kind of transversed into that next level of just working with pure energy fields and actually using it in a technological way through things like radiesthesia, biogeometry, and so forth, that allow us to not only develop, the next level where I need to go, but also the people that are ready to go to that level as well, which is much more of humanity than, say, 20, 30, 40 years ago. So these tools, as they evolve and become, in the average mind out there that's still more in the conventional mindset, well, this stuff's getting more etheric and more or less grounded. It's like, well, no. Actually, it's just a natural sequelae of the journey and going to the next step and not overstaying our welcome with, I could be in an office somewhere adjusting somebody's neck forever, and it's, and maybe some people, need that, but for my own journey, it's not where I need to be. And also for the many people on the planet now that are also ready to go to that next level of awareness, we need practitioners that, are just staying a half a step ahead of the crowd and being able to lead people in those services. And that gets back to some of the things we've talked about in past episodes, where the true definition, put out by Hippocrates of physician was, sort of a sacred vocation where you are helping people bridge the materialistic spiritual chasm that really doesn't exist in the first place, except in our own thought forms. And through these practices, now we're reunifying ourselves with those creative faculties that we had all along, so that we will never again be vulnerable to these predator class folks that are creating all this carnage on the planet right now. And also, we are needed to go to this level because we're having an entirely different radiation descend upon this planet, which is why all the truth is being exposed, even the really ugly stuff. But if there is not enough of humanity that is going there, then there is no, we need conduits anchored in on the ground, people that are still in embodiment, so that those hierarchies of intelligence can radiate through us. So the real purpose is not just to trip out on, we can go in and test and, fix somebody's liver or something without even touching them. No, it's to just, bring us into the awareness that we are not these bodies, and learn how to operate from the level of pure consciousness and be looking down on these embodiments, these experiences, without thinking that's who we are, so that the planet itself can transcend to where it's going, because we are the ones that are bringing in the light for the planet to make its journey as well.
Yeah, and that was something we kind of wrapped up the reunion summit with on day 7, was all about being that conduit of spirit and light. And it really does come down to that in the end, always, right? It comes down to these higher understandings of who we really are and what we're really here for. And it is inspiring, because then it really allows for us to get out of the muddied waters of what the system's trying to always focus us on, and really transcend any of the fear or the darker lower chakra kind of emotions that people seem to be stuck in, all the zombies we say around us. But those zombies, those people, they can, as you say, as we are a fulcrum for the light, we can influence them, and we can shoot that light into them, and they can, it's almost like there was this ride at Disneyland, because I used to go to Disneyland a lot. I grew up down there, and I actually, my first real job was at Disneyland. But there was this ride that I loved. It was called Captain EO, and believe it or not, it was Michael Jackson did it. I don't know if you've ever seen this ride, but it was like a 3D ride there, where Michael Jackson was kind of like a Star Wars kind of thing, and he had all these funny characters. But it had that where he's like, and I really believe Michael Jackson. I know Michael Jackson is a dark wormhole of conspiracy and people wonder. And I had the weird thing in my life where I worked. One of my mentors was Michael Jackson's partner for his record label. And also I worked with someone else who had taken over some of his library of unreleased music, which I got to hear. And was very close with the family, and said that they took Michael out because he was going to challenge the entire music industry as a black man, and they couldn't allow for that, so they killed him. And that a lot of the stuff in terms of the child stuff, I don't know about that. They say it was all BS. Also, I know he was heavily abused as a child, and his father was extremely abusive, and he was put through dark occult stuff as a child, and that really messed him up. So he didn't really ever have a childhood, and he didn't have connection to what it was to be a child and to have that youthful kind of spirit. And so he was always trying to engage that through Disneyland. He was obsessed with Disneyland. And I have a lot of weird Michael Jackson connections, because like when I was working at a restaurant in Santa Barbara, he rented out the restaurant. It was called Epiphany. And we had Michael Jackson come, and it was like 2 days before, he had like his own Secret Service come and inspect the whole place, and they had put special blinds on the windows, and he had the menu. And this was like a high-end French California cuisine place in Santa Barbara, where we had to do it all Disneyland themed, and it was all like Disney themed food. So it was like duck confit, Mickey Mouse duck confit, and just so bizarre. But where I'm going with this is that this Captain EO, and this is why I think Michael, because he wrote this, he worked with this, and I forgot if this was literally what's his name who did Star Wars and stuff. What's the producer? I'm blanking on his name right now. Not Spielberg, but the other dude. This show. What's that?
Lucas,
thank you. There's like all these dark kind of zombie creatures, and he has this rainbow that lights him up, and because he comes and brings the light in, and he's shooting light, and they're like the dark forces that are coming at him, and also they turn into these dancers. They turn into like these black and whatever. I don't think it was just all sides different type of people, and they start dancing, and they're all like lit up humans and it had such a great like inspirational, like good feeling. And I know Disneyland's dark and there's all this occult in it and stuff, but I really felt like this was actually Michael trying to be Michael. And but that was the messaging was like, if we are grounded in the light, we can shoot that at other people, and we can turn them on. And I really saw that with the summit, and I'm seeing a lot of people being that light. And so going outside, not wearing a mask, and smiling and sending that light to people who are in fear right now, I think is one of the most important things we should be doing.
Absolutely. And got to tell you my own Michael Jackson story. And I don't believe for a second any of the stuff that they brought against was an obvious smear, just assassination of the guy, including actually killing him. And, that's a whole story. But I was, and this actually ties in with applied kinesiology. I was at North Hollywood in a hotel, and we were having a applied kinesiology seminar. And so I went out at break, and this was right when his album, I think it was Off the Wall album or whatever it was.
Oh, so good.
And so I go out there and I just go into this little alcove, and I'm just sitting there by myself, just getting some quiet time at the break. And Michael Jackson walks by, and he kind of looks at me. He's kind of looking a little hectic, and he looks right at me, and I looked at him. And then he saw that I, wasn't going to bug him. And I go, kind of made a subtle face gesture. So he came and sat on the bench next to me. And I purposely didn't talk.
Now this wasn't because there's a lot of like Michael Jackson mimics and stuff in that area.
This was Michael Jackson. And it was in Hollywood. So he's sitting next to me, maybe about 3-4 feet away on the same, kind of upholstered little bench there. And, and I just left him alone. And then within a minute, somebody else walks by, does a double take. And then within moments, lost you. Oh, there you are. Within moments, there's a whole crowd. And then, some of his entourage, some big guys came and, ushered him out the door. And, we had one little moment of icon. Anyway, that's my Michael Jackson story. I was approached by George Lucas's people. You brought him up right before I moved to Hawaii. And the request was for me to be kind of a concierge trainer, doctor type of guy. And, basically I'd have one client and I just declined, but then introduced him to somebody else who's with him to this day, by the way, playing that role. But he was in Marin County at that time where I was living.
Mm-hmm.
So it was interesting, all that time period, there's so much creative stuff happening, so many personalities coming together. And because of what I did, I met a few of those people. Michael was just on one of these chance things.
Yeah. I mean, we lost you for a second there.
Okay. Am I back? You're back. So maybe that's a good wrap-up point. But if we have any in-house stuff you wanted to mention about what's going on, tell me.
Well, just we kind of covered it. The Illumin Shrooms is back. We are very proud of that product, so check it out. We are busy on the farm right now. We've got, a really important thing. We've launched our GoFundMe. If you go to alfavedic.com/fundraiser, we are in the process of pushing that out more and more. We have a big push going through the Reunion Summit next week. As we say in the trailer for the GoFundMe, we will get there no matter what, but we feel like it's more pressing than ever to get this building up and get the next phase of the Alfa Vedic co-op kind of functional learning space and lab for you. And it will also allow us to do commerce in a bigger way so that we can, get into Canada and these other places so that we can evolve, grow and be able to reach more and allow people to come on the land and learn and develop all the initiatives we want to do. So that GoFundMe is, and I'll put it in the show notes below, is just, you can reach it at alfavedic.com/fundraiser. We do have a target for $100,000. It's like go big because this is important. It's a kind of an Earthship kind of design, and we'll have Dr. Lando's lab. It'll allow us to teach. It'll allow us to really go to the next level. So anything, $5, $10, anything that you guys can offer would be amazing to help us out there. And then those who are bugging us and bugging us lovingly that they want to come and visit and help and learn, we'll be able to facilitate that. We have plans to put in a couple nice glamping pads that people can stay in because we want people to have a nice experience, not just like, in a tent or something, or in even like a yurt or something. I mean, yeah, I mean, a yurt is a possibility, right? Or a nice glamping tent, but with a really nice outdoor shower and restroom. And we're building the infrastructure of this place. We're adding a pond, right? For lots of different reasons, all tied into the permaculture design, of course. But we have a vision for the land that will allow Alfa Vedic to really go to where we want it to go, which is educational, which is community, having more community on the land, and helping us and working with us, and you guys helping us, bringing your spirit and your knowledge and wisdom to us up in our little corner of the world. So that is alfavedic.com/fundraiser. Anything else, Bear?
No, just, this GoFundMe is kind of a new wrinkle in my brain, and really goes against my nature, because we've always been very independent. But what I've realized recently is that we are, I don't want to say competing, but competing with the beast in trying to outrun certain things, that are financed by billions of dollars. And so, we're just one little part in our part of the world, and other people elsewhere that, Michael, you and I are working with behind the scenes, that are doing similar things to decentralize all the power and so forth. And, we need a little bit of help with that. I'm in a phase of my life where I don't, need a career. I don't need to do any of this stuff. All my retirement I've pretty much put into all this stuff anyway. And right now. And all as far as products, it's not just putting out products on the website. When we get the lab up, we're not just doing plant medicine spagyrics and things. We're doing mineral spagyrics and things that are very, very powerful, that will require a lot of scrutiny as far as who takes them, because they will put you through very remarkable changes in a beneficial way, but you have to be ready for it. So part of the co-op and the closed membership club is to make very special things available, to people that are ready for that kind of product that won't be available to the general public, and also teach other people how to make those things. And, I'm involved with a lot of supply chains, where I have to buy certain things through old trusted European channels of spagyrics and things that are high quality, much beyond what you get in health food stores, but they're all shutting down. I had a conversation yesterday where, they don't have half the stuff they used to have. And so it's becoming very apparent, as far as how the world is going, that we really need to provide everything for ourselves. And the fact is with our own laboratories, with our own growing grounds, we can do much better, than even the old school spagyric outfits from Europe. We can much more potent, much more, just much more powerful, and create the changes that we're ready for. So and then we want to teach, because every area has to have similar operations, where you're providing for yourself. That's what our goal is.
The centralized model, so spreads across. We're obviously not expecting to be the only thing out here doing this, because we know there's a lot of amazing operations all across the world doing stuff. So we're just trying to add our little piece, and then allowing people to go off and do it themselves. And we're doing this with the 4-H, local 4-H program here. We'll be doing gardening classes, and in fact, I need to reach out to them and get I'm definitely my youngest involved with 4-H ASAP. And they're being cool about everything, in terms of the cornholio. So that's great. And one last comment here, and I'm not trying to be contentious or anything with this individual, because I agree with everything they're saying, Bear. But I guess we have to factor in a lot of different stuff in terms of this manifestation. 3 Basket Living says, here, I'll just put it up on the screen. It can be done without, quote unquote, costing you any currency, and we know currency is a loaded term there. I wish you guys knew that. No need for, quote unquote, donations from your fellow man. It's prepaid, whether you know it or not. You're already funded. And so, yes, I couldn't agree more. We've done an entire podcast on this, on abundance model, with the science of getting rich. We know all about manifestation. And as we clearly state in the GoFundMe, we will do it However, this is about time. This is a race now. And so what all we're trying to do is we're trying to collaborate with the manifestations of our like-minded people and people in our community so we can co-create this together. And so currently that is in the form of monetary donations that we are then pulling together to create this. But how would you reply to that, Barre?
I would first of all agree with everything that person says. And if that person knew some of my personal past experiences where we've been targeted and stripped of everything, because of our involvement of just making good things available and telling the truth. And that every step of the way, even in later age, being stripped of all earthly possessions because of what we do, because of our understanding, we've resurrected ourselves every single time and materialized at this point a complete farm that's bought and paid for without one single dime from anybody else. And so, yeah, I get those principles just fine. And if it was just me, myself, and my wife out here and my dog, and we weren't involved with the public at all, I wouldn't be in a hurry at all, and I'd have no doubt that everything would materialize. And so, everybody just, if it resonates, and if you want to help out, just like when you, for instance, April.
Shoot, you
a little piece of paper and pay money to the beast, even though it's wrong. And the only reason why you're doing it is because you're afraid to do it. And in the process, you're funding, weaponizing the people that are trying to destroy you. You can make a choice. You can say, well, yeah, I can do that, which most people will end up doing, even if you know better. Or you can, maybe, not just donate, but just at least on, more the etheric level, support people that are actually trying to do something good for the planet. So, yeah, I get your point, and I don't take anything, negative about it. And, but
well, and
the only
I'll just
the only thing I'd add to this, guys, you're preaching to the choir.
Yeah, and I'll just say you mentioned an important factor that is counter to if we were in a realm of pure manifestation, then yes. However, we know that there are dark forces attacking, and so we are in extreme situations in this realm right now, and it's important that we help each other out. So I have given to many GoFundMes, and the crowdsourcing idea seems to make a lot of sense when we're up against it. So use their own systems against them. So, hey, Barre, wonderful chat. Everybody, I hope you enjoyed it. Please give us a thumbs up, share if this resonated with you. And you can find this, of course, at alfavedic.com/Alfacast. It's where all our shows are. Please support our guests that we have. And next week, we'll have Foster Gamble on from the Thrive Movement. That'll be a fun one. I'll be coming live from Bend, Oregon on a ski trip, but we'll make it work. And thanks again, everybody. And don't forget, we have the free weekend replay of Reunion Summit. ReunionSummit.com starts tomorrow. You can catch all the talks, join in on the live chat for each. It should be a very fun time. Have a wonderful, beautiful Easter weekend. And we'll see you next week. Later.